But the thing is that science fiction is a genre that builds on itself because it's read by the same people. And even people who don't read science fiction, they absorb the science fictional notions from from the cultural zeitgeist, as it were. So I can do all of these things at once in a way that the people who were doing it in the 20th century couldn't. Because when William Gibson is talking about cybernetic implants in 1984, he needs to introduce the concept to the reader. When Walter John Williams is writing Hardwired and Voice of the Whirlwind, you need to spend some time on that. But when I'm writing Theft of Fire, I can then draw on the world that this built and say, okay, this is a neural lace implant, and I just need to say a few things about, he's reading his email on it. It has a augmented reality overlay where he's looking at stuff, and he has a cybernetic eye, and he's tuning it to thermal infrared to see in the dark, and all of this stuff is familiar territory. So you can use it as a Lego block to build something else instead of having to make it the point of your story. So there's a lot of exciting possibilities there.
And you were also able to build off not just the science fiction that came before, but we seem to be now in an era in the last 5 to 10 years of scientific and technological breakthroughs, LLMs, Neuralink, things of that nature, constant space flight that now opens up a whole new possibility. I mean, it was always interesting that there was the whole issue with Blade Runner 2049, and that when Blade Runner first came out and they projected into the future, there was obviously a whole ton of things that they missed, mobile phones, the internet, and then how they had to deal with that when they made the sequel. And so here you have this kind of influx of not only all the history of science fiction, but the history of technological achievement.
Yeah. There's a loop between science fiction and engineering. And sometimes I think it really should be called engineering fiction because it's engineering that drives it. Science is always getting credit for the stuff engineering does. But there's a loop where the engineers influence the authors and the authors influence the engineers. If you look at the 20th century, if you look at all of the technologies that were invented in the 20th century, name 4 that were not anticipated in science fiction.
Well, and it's funny because were they anticipated or were they put out there and then some engineer said, I want that to exist, so I'm going to build it, right? That's
exactly
it's the loop.
Where I was going.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I was going. It's both. You look at the engineering trends and you say, this is what I think might happen. And then the engineers say, oh, and one of the things that science fiction does for us is it gives us a chance to think about future technologies before they happen. And what are we going to do about them? How are we going to use them? How are we going to regulate or not regulate them? As William Gibson said, the street tends to find its own uses for things. We will invent a technology for one purpose and people will find totally different things to turn it to. And we can get a head start on that in science fiction. But often the technologies themselves exist because someone's imagination was fired by reading about the fictional version of them.